Hello there and welcome to today's video. So we can't really do much outside car related because it's tipping it down with rain. So we're going to take a look at this K11 Micra Brochure which I bought recently, and this is for the tail end of the original generation. So this is pre the 1998 facelift. And this one was actually printed in December of 95, so this probably would have covered the 96 model year. So immediately you can sort of tell that it's actually a lot thicker than the newer Micra brochures which I have. And as you can actually sort of tell here, there is much more car related bits and pieces. There's actually, the range is actually slightly bigger as well, I think. And they do seem to sort of like have an emphasis on photographing the Micra in rather nice locations, as you can see here. Sort of less of the lifestyle slant with this particular brochure, and this sort of more focusing on the fact that it's an enjoyable car to drive, and also the desirability factor. So obviously a sort of a small car that was quite desirable at the time. Also had some rather interesting trim options, such as this rather interesting ensemble that we've got going on here. And also talking about the amount of space that you have as well, along with other features such as the 60/40 split rear seats on most models apparently, the integrated rear fog lamp switch which is nice, and also the fresh air recirculation control switch, which is actually more appropriate for models which have air conditioning. On models without air conditioning it can lead to a slightly stuffy interior, but for models with air conditioning it actually helps recirculate dry air for obviously demisting purposes, but also in the summer helps recirculate cold air and get the air colder, and in some cases actually save fuel. So here we are talking about the advanced for the time engines. Not every single small car in these days had 16 valve engines as standard across the range. So this was actually sort of quite a big selling feature at the time. You have to remember that the Vauxhall Corsa B had a selection of sturdy and reliable Family 1 engines, which were 4-cylinder 8-valve engines. And I don't think even at this time we had the Corsa Sport models, which had a 1.4 or 1.6 16-valve unit. Now interestingly, if you look at this particular shot of the engine here, you can see that we have the auxiliary setup which suits the models with air conditioning. As you can see down the bottom there, here, you've got the air conditioning compressor. However, for the UK market, for this particular generation, I cannot see anywhere where air conditioning was an option. Certainly in this brochure anyway. So I don't think AC was an option on the UK models until the facelift. So here we are talking about the handling of the vehicle. And for the time, for a small car, it had quite an advanced setup. It doesn't look advanced, but when you actually think about it, it is quite advanced. So you've got a 5-link rear suspension setup, obviously independent front suspension, but the 5-link rear was actually better than a lot of the competitors who literally just had a rear twist beam set up. The Micra had the rear beam, but it also had the panhard rod, and that rear beam was located in approximately 4 different places. So, and also on certain models you had the rear anti-roll bar as well. which you know, it really sort of does add to the handling prowess. And certainly one thing I can vouch for is the Micra is quite a stable, tight little turner, especially on the limit. There's no sort of hint of any oversteer. In fact, if anything, it tends to sort of go more towards a four-wheel drift situation. Lift-off oversteer, I haven't really experienced that, but then again, I haven't been stupid enough to snap the throttle shut mid-corner. But I would imagine that, as with any sort of light front-wheel drive car with a light rear end, you will get a degree of lift-off oversteer, but because that axle is so well located, I would expect it to be fairly controllable. We're also big on safety. On this particular year, we do have airbags available. We also had on certain models ABS brakes, which was, you know, sort of another sort of feature that was quite unusual on smaller cars of the time. We also got the crumple zones and side impact beams. Again, a very big thing at the time for this particular car was the fact that it was quite safe. Now, the ABS system on this particular version had used four-wheel discs. Later versions of the ABS actually had the standard front disc rear drum setup. So it's sort of quite interesting to see how they've sort of changed it over the years. Also talks about the NCVT transmission. This is an earlier version of the HCVT that my Micra uses. So the NCVT, the actual box itself is, from what I understand, similar, but instead of a conventional hydraulic torque converter, you have what's known as a powder clutch. So effectively it is a torque converter like housing containing, for want of a better sort of description, iron filings. Around the outside of this there are two conductive rings, and there are two carbon brushes which make contact with these rings, and the more current that is put through into this particular unit, the more, I guess, sort of energised the iron filings become, and to the point where it's actually enough to turn the road wheels. So it sort of makes sort of a more solid connection, I guess. I'm sort of trying to work out how it actually works. It's sort of, they're agitated into a point where they actually make, I think they engage something inside this sort of drum setup and allow the car to move forward. The version of the CVT that these models use doesn't have the characteristic creep that a standard automatic transmission would have, or one of the more conventional hydraulic CVT or hyper CVT models, such as the transmission that's in mine. It has, on later models, actually taken away one of the areas that you need to check. Approximately every 27,000 miles you need to remove those brushes and check them. Every 27,000 miles or 2 years, whatever comes first. So we start off the range with, I think we have the shape, and then we move on to the S, and we have the rather nice selection of gauges there. I don't know if it came with a rev counter on this model, but I think they were colour coded. There's a rather nice one there in that yellow colour, which we'll be going on to in a minute. It's quite a nice yellow. Actually metallic, if I remember rightly. You then got the GX, which adds a little more plushness to the range. Special seat fabrics. All three-door models have hinged rear side windows, and ABS is available as an option on the 1.3, which is good. Also got these tweeters as well. Got the inside tailgate door handle, which is quite a nice little feature. There's one there with its nice full coverage wheel trims, looking very resplendent in that nice shade of paint there, which we'll be coming on to in a moment. And now we got the interesting one, which is the SR. And that was the sporty offering of the range. Got the 6-speaker stereo radio cassette with RDS, including 2 tweeters, and the front pillars are also standard. And add into the dynamic image alloy wheels with sporty 175/60 R13 tyres. Ooh, and look at this, ABS and power steering are available as an option pack. I definitely would have been ticking that box. We've got some rather nice sports seats there. Got the rear roof spoiler, which is a complete wraparound affair, which is different to the one that I have on mine. And you've got these rather snazzy front fog lamps and these very good looking alloy wheels. All in all, that is a very, very attractive little car, especially in black. Now we've got the range topper, which is the SLX. If you're looking for top levels of luxury, we invite you to experience the pleasures of the Micra SLX. The SLX is a 5-door model with a 1.3 16-valve twin-cam, multi-point fuel-injected engine, available with either NCVT or manual transmission. In fairness, joking aside, it wasn't actually that bad. You know, you've got the rev counter there, you've got the electric front windows, you've got these rather snazzy wheel trims, and a photo where it has been taken in a very affluent looking destination there, location, with some very affluent looking people of the mid-90s. See, there's a woman there wearing yellow strides, trousers, or whatever you want to call them. There's a young lady there who could be, in this shot, 25 years old, but now she would probably be knocking on the door of nearly 50. Looking back at this and thinking, I was in a brochure once for the Nissan Micra. Where has all of that time gone? I can't believe it's been nearly 25 years. Actually, it's nearly 23 years, but there you go. Security, here we are. The details of the Nissan Anti-Theft System 2, which talks about the immobiliser, which again was quite an interesting sort of thing that was happening around this time. There was sort of quite a big push on security built into the car, rather than having those sort of arguably slightly dodgy aftermarket setups. I was watching recently a video with the ever interesting gentleman Harry Metcalf. I can highly recommend his channel, Harry's Garage. It's absolutely brilliant and thoroughly entertaining way to spend one's viewing time. But he took his Testarossa to the Sahara, and he was immobilised just outside of Marrakesh, and the cause was a dodgy 1980s aftermarket alarm. It's best, if you do have one of those alarm systems, or a car with one of those alarm systems, to just unpick it from the loom and, be perfectly honest with you, put it in the bin. A lot of them were not fitted particularly well, and his was certainly a case that the alarm was not fitted in a particularly great fashion. So anyway, we got this page here that talks about accessories, and we've got this interesting selection of alloy wheels. Now, I rather like these. I think these are quite snazzy. I've seen these, and I've seen these, but I've never seen one with these. Again, seems to be another sort of wheel design, like in the later brochure, that was either not available or nobody ever spec'd them. I personally quite like them. They sort of remind me, for some reason, of the back of a washing machine. I don't know why. The drum pulley setup. Also, this was quite exciting, this wood trim pack that you could specify. which actually looks rather nice. And also quite jealous of these protective entry guards. Certainly something I would quite like, to be honest, for mine. And this one here looks rather nice. There's again another young lady there who would now be knocking on the door of 50 probably. Maybe not 50 actually. I think actually. So if she was say 20 there, she would be 43 now, I guess. So here we've got the specs. So I'll just go through the specs fairly slowly. Interestingly, the CVT versions are very long geared. So if you look at fifth on the petrol, the manual rather, it's 0.850, but the overdrive on the CVT is even lower, which is why it is pulling at 70 miles an hour. It's just pulling 3,000 RPM, which actually sort of makes it quite a nice motorway cruiser. We've got the colours here, and these are definitely some colours that I like. I definitely prefer the earlier colours to the later ones. You have sort of a more interesting range. Cassis is that sort of solid purple. I see a lot of them in that colour. Never seems to rust. Ugin Gold is a lovely colour, but you don't see it much anymore. Viridian is a nice colour, as is Cobalt Blue. Morello Pearl is quite pleasant, as is Cypress Green. And you've also got Curo Black, which is nice. And I guess you could call it a staple of the range, is Starburst Silver, KL0, which doesn't seem to have changed throughout the entire production run. I think silver is just one of those colours that it's so neutral, just never goes out of fashion, which is probably why it's nicknamed Resale Silver. People always buy silver cars. It's a non-offensive colour. It's a little bit boring, but it is actually very rewarding when polished up. Silver car does look very good when polished. Incidentally, this chart here is just showing us the body colour code and the colour combination for the seat fabric. And you can actually see, interestingly, you cannot get Ugin Gold on the SLX. But you can get it on the SR, the GX and the S, but you can't get it on the Shape. In fact, the Shape, the only metallic option you've got is Starburst Silver. You can't get any of these colours. And black is only available on the S and the SR, which is interesting. However, the GX and the SLX do have a full range of colours, apart from Cassis, which was only available on the Shape, actually. So that's why all the purple ones are base spec. Never knew that. But now that does make sense. So we've got the equipment here. I've gone through this and I cannot see anywhere any reference whatsoever to air conditioning, which does suggest to me that air conditioning was not an option on this particular generation. You could get it on the March, and you could get it on the Mitsuka Vute, which I think they were sort of around in this particular time. But for the UK spec Micra, it does not appear, unfortunately. Air conditioning was an option. The actual Sunderland Factory was still fairly new around this point. I think it was only sort of 10 years old or so. So it was opened in about 1986, if I recall. So yeah, it would have been nearly 10 years old. And they still make sort of quite a big thing about the fact that it is British built, and also that it was voted Car of the Year in 1993, It's made in the UK, and the Queen's Award for Export has been won for 3 successive years by exporting British-built Primeras to more than 30 countries, including Japan, which I think is pretty impressive. Also impressive for the time was this 3-year or 60,000-mile warranty, and that 6-year anti-corrosion and 3-year paint warranty, regardless of the mileage driven, which for the time was certainly a pretty good offering. Also got the Motability program there, and also got the Nissan in Business, a service dedicated to fleet and business markets. Nissan seemed to be sort of around this time, sort of in the 90s. This seemed to be their sort of their sort of heyday, so to speak. They seemed to sort of trail off in the early 2000s. And certainly the Primera was discontinued and not directly replaced with anything. And they sort of seem to concentrate more on the sort of the small SUV market with the Qashqai and then the Duke. And it only seems now that they're sort of really coming back in to themselves, which is good, but arguably under Renault ownership, the quality has, dare I say, slipped. So very much this generation of Micra, and certainly these generation of Nissans, were certainly some of the better cars that they actually built, and they sold well, if I remember rightly. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. It's a nice little look at this brochure from 1995. I'd like to thank you all very much for watching, and if you would have enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, and also consider subscribing for more fascinating upcoming hobbies. Thanks for watching.